Welcome to Weird Games and Weirder People, a podcast about role playing games and the weird, wonderful people behind them. Hello, weirdos! This is Diogo Nogueira, and welcome to Weird Games and Weirder People. Today's guest is the entity known as Goblin Archives, the creator of Liminal Horror and many adventures for this very intriguing and horrific system. And before we talk about it a little bit more, I would like to remind you to please subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to your podcast. Leave us a review telling what you think about the show, what you think we can improve, and share it with your friends, with your gaming group, with your neighbors, with everyone you know. And if you have any coins left from your last adventure, seek out on the show notes where you can support the show, pay us a coffee at Ko-Fi or buy one of my games. And I have an announcement: if you're in Brazil, by any chance, I will be at Diversão Offline in São Paulo this weekend. So stop by, say hello, and we can talk weird and talk about game design and games and whatever. But getting back to talk about Goblin Archives, we talk about Liminal Horror, of course. We talk about its development. We talk about its plans for the future. We talk about how he loves to collaborate with people to improve the game and making more things for it and create amazing tools for players out there and groups to create this horrific and very intriguing adventures and experience. And we talked about how art is a muscle, how we have to keep it fit, we have to keep it exercising. We talked about game design, the importance of knowing that you don't have to, reinvent the wheel when you make a new game. We talked about how he's a supreme procrastinator. We talked about the importance of, taking a pause. We talked about Disco Elysium as an inspiration, which is a fantastic computer RPG. It's very thoughtful, weird, and very funny too. We talked about how he had teenage years when he was like a daredevil and had very crazy experiences. It was a very fun and very interesting chat. I learned a lot from it. I hope you do too. So let's get weird with Goblin Archives. Hello, Goblin Archives. Welcome to Weird Games and Weirder People. It's awesome to have you here. I'm a big fan of your work, of Liminal Horror. So how have you been, my friend?
I've been really well. It's been an exciting time. We have a lot of stuff coming up. It's been a very busy time for the Liminal Horror Camp, but I'm really glad to be here joining with you.
Yeah, it's been amazing seeing how a game that we kind of make inspired by other game just grows, and seeing how Liminal Horror began in this kind of horror take on into the odd and begin to grow, and this very influential horror gaming in the scene, and has a way of doing like the mysteries and stuff that's really, for me at least, very inspiration, and say, oh, I gotta see how they do this, and see how I can steal this to my game. So it's a pleasure to see a game grow organically and with the support of the community. But for maybe the wonderful weirdos out there, don't know who Goblin Archives is, what is that you do, can you maybe say who is or what is Goblin Archives? What is that you do? And if you can, just share a small weird detail about you, about the way you do things, and maybe your clothes, or maybe your glasses, or maybe how you do coffee, or something you do every day.
Yeah, so I'm Goblin Archives. I wrote a game, well, I hacked a game called Liminal Horror, which was like a modern horror take on a OSR game, taken from Yo Heigal's Cairn, which was just like works so well. I was like, why would I create a whole new system? Instead, I'll just like reiterate upon it, the bones that worked so well. Um, I do a lot of things around trying to build up community and provide access to resources. Like I did a thing called the Annotated Archive of Game Design Resources that I used to catalog all the stuff I used when I started out. Like,
Mm.
oh, about fonts, about this and layout and that. And then a few other projects around just really trying to make it easy for others to make games the way I felt like the community helped it easy for me to make games. Weird detail about me. So I'm a pretty ritualistic person in terms of I like to do things pretty similarly as much as possible. So when I get up, I have 4 cats now. I used to have 5. We're getting a new kitten next week. But so I get up and like the first thing I have to do is I have to feed them, make sure their water's done because they drink a lot of water, and then I get to then take care of myself and make my iced coffee in the morning and get everything ready. I go to work pretty early, but I wake up earlier than that, of course, to like have some time in the morning to get ready, and then
Decompress.
sometimes yeah, decompress, and then sometimes I was better about it recently, and then it sort of fell off as the spring has gotten busy, but spend a little bit of time doing some sort of writing in the morning. Um, Either it being,
Nice.
like working on the deluxe edition or updating, newsletters, things like some game work in the morning because I find that's where I do my best thinking. By the end of the day, I'm sort of a pile of mush. And so being making sense and writing words isn't as easy in the afternoon as it is for me in the wee hours of the morning.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Depending on the people, some artists are better working in the morning than in the evening. So for you, it's really the moment you wake up. Do you have any idea why? Do you think that this is just about tiresome, or maybe it's something inspired by the subconscious that you just wake up, or something like this, or
I feel like if it's like the maximum capacity of like what I am doing at the morning, it mirrors. I work in schools, and so like earlier in my career, like getting ready for the classroom, I've always found I would get there way earlier because I was just more effective, more efficient. I could do things faster. I had more creative ideas of like, oh, this lesson should be like this morning. And that carries over the game stuff too. And I find, like you then throughout the day sort of pour out your whole effort, showing up, interacting. That by the end of the day, when I get home, it's much more around decompressing and recharging. Like I can and will do stuff in the evenings. Like that's funnily enough, that's when I play games is at night in
yeah,
tabletop games. But um, that sort of like creative generation tends to be a very early morning thing. I find there
yeah,
is like a window. If I miss it, I'm like, oh, well, I'm not getting any writing done today because I missed the window of like
yeah.
effective hyper focusing.
Do you still try anyway, or it's just like it's not even worth it? How do you? Or it really
Um,
depends of the day. Some days you're like, I'm really tired. I'm not gonna even try. Or
yeah, sometimes it just depends. A lot of times too, it's if the inspiration strikes, then it doesn't matter what time, right?
yeah, that's true.
But when
Yeah,
it comes to like I try to like be a pre-planner, so I'll think through, okay, like, oop, I need to do integrate the edits on this new module. So then I'll like get my mind ready for, okay, Saturday morning, I'm going to do that. And then I sit and hit that ground running. I'm less effective when I have to be flexible in terms of like, it's like a surprise. So
yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
depends. I find it's funny because people often talk about art as like this ethereal thing, but I really find it to be like any other skill. And um things that you sit down and you do and you practice,
It
and
is.
practice makes
It
better.
is. Yeah.
And when people, sometimes people talk about, well, I can't do that because I, and like these things are super tangible in terms of it really is about practice and putting that effort in and finding what works for you, because we all
Oh
have
yeah.
different styles. And like it took
Yeah.
me a long time to like really pinpoint, oh, this is when I am effectively the most creative. And so like trying to like nurture and support structure around that for myself was really helpful. As we get older, we get hopefully get more self-reflective and find what works for us.
Yeah.
Instead of it being an accident, it's something I can replicate.
Yeah. You mentioned the way you art. I always see like art and the practice. I always compare things like a muscle, right? You have to exercise it to keep it, ready. But you also, if you can overwork it, you get strained. It will be, hard. Probably you have to stay a little while to recover. Like the burnout's kind of this, And also, if you stay too long without practicing it, to go back to it is really hard, right? Like to sit down again and write. But after you get like a consistency, a routine, it gets easier, right?
Yeah,
I'm doing exercise for a long while, and now if I don't do it, I kind of miss it. So it's kind of, I say I don't like it, but I like it less when I don't do it. You know?
exactly. I find I do a lot of weightlifting, and I can tell now, as having done it for a while and having it such a ritual routine, that if I miss it, I can tell that I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't do this thing. That sometimes you have to,
Yeah.
even if you love it, you have to work yourself up to into doing it. Um,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
because doing nothing is the easiest, and so like doing any sort of
It's
action
yeah.
does take work.
It's very seductive to just sit back and hit a button, and you have entertainment available to you. Anything you want, right?
This is
It's very easy to not do anything.
Yes, but then you can just convince yourself that me watching this is actually me doing research, and so it's okay. Then I
Yeah,
feel better about it.
that's even worse. That's good. You get I don't. It's I'm always divided between this. Yeah, I have to rest, but I have to work. But is this? I'm convincing myself I have. Why do I have to work? Well, I don't know. It's very hard to navigate this thing. But
So,
yeah.
funnily enough, for me, segueing a little bit is I find I for anyone who doesn't know about like liminal horror or like the games that gets put out is after I made it and put it out and then I was writing the first module. Me and then Josh Dominski, who's now my co-writer, started working together. And I have found, for me personally, the act of having a pretty consistent collaborator has really helped me push me in terms of like holding me a little more accountable to getting things done, I guess, right? Because when you're working with someone else, it's not just like me not doing a thing doesn't only affect me, it affects them as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but then the also flip end is like constantly being inspired by someone else is really helpful because it pushes you to do your best. So
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
found for myself, if I had to pinpoint one of the things that like has really pushed the success, I put in air quotes for those who can't listening to the audio, the success has been really working closely with collaborators throughout pretty much everything now. I don't really do a thing solo anymore. Not because I don't think I could, because I've put things out by myself. It's just that I
Mm-hmm.
think they are better in having with others.
Yeah. That's that's a wise choice. I mean, I don't know. The pressure is I feel like I already put so much pressure into me, and then have this pressure of someone. It's just too much for me.
Oh, for sure, and it's not
Yeah.
for everyone, right?
Yeah.
It's also just been
But
happenstance
it's
guys of
yeah.
finding the right person to
Yeah. Yeah.
that works really well with you. But
Yeah.
even not having a co-writer, like constantly collaborating with, I try to collaborate consistently with similar artists
Oh
or
yeah.
editors, and I find that that social part of games has been really rewarding on the
Mm-hmm.
creative end.
Yeah.
It sort of mirrors how to me, the biggest thing is like, let's play games. Like in the end, it comes down to playing games, and that is also, well, other than solo games, done together.
Yeah. For me, this kind of exchange and collaboration, or maybe this connection that you talk about, it's also one of the reasons I do this podcast. So this is one of the things, I exchange ideas. So people talk about their products, I talk about mine, and it kind of helps me, push forward and motivates me to keep doing stuff, because it's kind of follow example of all these amazing people doing these great things in kind of recharges me in a way. But I do have this kind of with the freelance stuff. So I have this pressure of doing the freelance stuff. So
Mhm.
it's still kind of some collaboration, and I have some people doing adventures for Primal Quest. So, but sometimes it's too much for me. I
Oh,
get paralyzed. It's like
I
it's like yeah.
it's that weird balance, and I guess that's with everything, right? You got to find what works, and sometimes you go way too far on one end and then way too far on the
Yeah,
other.
yeah.
But like, I think my favorite part about games, right? I love running games. I love playing games with my friends, and then as I started to make stuff, I loved talking to other people about what they're making and seeing and
Yeah.
giving advice or just cheerleading, or answering questions or anything like that, I've found it emulates that sort of feeling of at the table, but in a larger scale, has just
Yeah.
been exciting. Like, right, like we're talking from across the globe right now, which is exciting. I have friends all over, um,
Yeah.
friends in other countries doing translations, and just getting the chance to chat and
Yeah.
check in with people I would have never met if I really kept my scope super
For sure.
small.
And there is this thing like that I love saying too, that like every art, every like creation is kind of a collaborative thing, because you're always building upon the idea of others. You're always, being inspired by other people. And you said about something when you created Liminal Hack, that why didn't have I didn't have to reinvent anything. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I watched like a course with Will Wright, the game designer from Sin City, and he says like, well, it's not about making new rules or new mechanics. It's about using the right mechanics for your game. So if there is already something out there that works, you don't
Mhm.
have to reinvent everything all the time. Uh, I like reinventing new mechanics and new systems, but it's generally some reinterpretation of something that come before. Sometimes I invent something, but it's really not about always have to make something new. It's just finding what would work for your game, right? Taking some kind of context. Uh, so how did you saw a fantasy game, this kind of fantasy, dark fantasy game, and you saw this? Oh, I'm gonna make a modern horror game out of this. And how did you? Can you give us like examples of weird things that you made and made it work for like the horror?
Yeah. So, it was so a big part, funnily enough, you had talked about how this podcast helps you connect with others. As I've said before, I think I said it on the Lost Bay podcast because I heard Yohai talking about making games, on the Lost Bay. I think it was the first episode, and I listened to it, and then I got really inspired to be like, well, wait, I should try to make something too. Like, I love it. I love running things. Like, why wouldn't I also take a stab at this? And then it happened to be that as I was looking for things, I was like, Cairn just works so well. I loved Electric Bastionland, and I loved what Yohai was doing with that. And part of it was thinking about of what I was being inspired by at that time, which was a lot of like, um, horror short stories and short story like narrative podcasts, like horror, and then starting to get into horror films as well. And when thinking about, okay, I want to make something, but I don't want to just like make another Heartbreaker or do like, I was like, oh, I could do sci-fi. I was like, well, I really like how Mothership plays, so could I offer something new there? And then when looking at sort of the OSR, kind of like what's sort of out there, I was like, well, there's really a missing piece of there's not really a modern horror system at that moment, that I felt like that really caught me. And so I was like, okay, let me try doing Karen with that. And it was pretty straightforward. I kept a lot, like the rules are very much the same. But then I had to think about how a lot of those horror systems, deal with, if we think Call of Cthulhu, right? They do sanity and they sort of stigmatize, mental
Yeah,
illness as, being
yeah,
a problem, and that part I felt very uncomfortable with. So I tried to figure out how could I reframe in a way that doesn't fall into those negative tropes, and so that's where I did this sort of stress, um, fallout, which just makes you weirder, like makes you more like the things you're fighting, like are like narrative hooks as opposed to that sort of stigmatizing mental illness. And so that was more, I found a mechanic that would work. I tried to mirror it like damage, but made it more sort of metaphysical, and then, um, sort of built and iterated it on top of there. I find a lot of my work though, how I approach things creatively, like adventures or things, is around, I read and watch a lot, and I take just inspiration. I watch that, and I oftentimes will like take fragments of notes on my phone as I'm watching something, and then forget about that note document and then go back and look at it like a month later with fresh eyes and sort of like see what I can harvest for parts. Um, but that was really sort of looking at what wasn't there and trying to make something to fill that space because I didn't at that moment. Now there's a lot of modern horror stuff coming out, which is awesome. People are really vibing on that kind of those adventures and things, but there wasn't really sort of or sort of lighter games and sort of like that style. Um, when I was putting Liminal Horror out that I was aware of, and so I just wanted to put something up that I wanted to play because it ends up being I've been playing a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
it, right? And so I had to have something that I wanted to play with my friends.
Yeah, I was just reading someone on Twitter saying think the best advice they would say is make the games you want to play. Like it's one of the things that show your work, but also can say is like the most boring advice you give to artists, like it's or writers, is write about what you know, and we end up with these boring novels about stuff that people know. It's not. It's write about what you want to read. Like write the novel you wanna read, write the game you wanna play, like design the game you wanna play, and I think that's a great advice because not only it's more likely for you to finish it because you want to play this, so you have to finish so you can play it. Uh, but also, I think it's easier because like we will have to promote this and put it on people's eyes. And when you are making something that you really are passionate about and you love, it's easier to do this, right? To talk about it, because at least for me, like as a creator, the marketing part is not the something we do enjoy doing, right? So having something that you're not doing this just to make a sell, right? Because it's something you really like. I think that helps you to put it out there and people notice it's something that is made with love and care. Maybe they would check it out. What do you agree with this? How do you approach this?
Oh, completely. It has to be something I'm interested in and want to play. Um, I'm doing a lot more like adventures now since we are working on the deluxe edition, but like adventures are primarily what I'm spending a lot of my time with, and 100% of it time it's an adventure I want to run or play.
Mm-hmm.
One because you're spending so much time with it, right? You're writing it, you're reapproaching it, you're doing layout. Like you have to. It has to be something you're interested in because you're going to spend hours upon hours with. A lot of times too, it's things that I don't make my own art. That's a thing that I collaborate with people on, and so it has to be something that I want to see cool art for, right? That I want to see someone's interpretation of. If it's something I'm not passionate about, why would I, why would I spend so
Yeah.
much time with it, right? And so, on a whole, I've played everything I've ever written. Sometimes I've played it before it was done, and sometimes it's after. But every time it's something I will want to take to the table once, if not more times. And so, you really, to me, I have to be passionate about it. If didn't care about it, I wouldn't spend as much effort.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's we have so much things to do right now, right? So one more project about something we really don't want to do. It's not something we will check, we'll seek out for sure. And the show will show is weird games and weird people. And liminal horror does a lot with the weird, with the strange. And so I wanted to ask you, as I do with other guests here, is can you try to define what is weird for you and how do you seek that in your work and also in your life in general?
So I think from the most basic level, like weird is something outside the norm or typical, and not norm or typical be in more like being like the everyday routine. Right? I talked about how I love my routines and my rituals. Right? Those are the things that are the same every day. But the weird is when something diverges from that or like really contrasts it. How that shows up in my games and work and like what I do is one of my favorite things about having something set in a modern life is I can you can have that juxtaposition of like the everyday, and then when something really diverts from that, like that contrast is where the fun happens or the horror happens, or
Yeah.
the unsettling. And that part to me is where it's really interesting, right? When you play with that with your players, or when I play with that in the writing. Um, in terms of my everyday life, I like things to be very much the same. um, I tend to, where I find the weird and engage with that is through others' art, right? My everyday life at work and things, I do like things to be successful and more typical. But when I'm seeking out like something to watch or something to read, I really want it to be something that um, pushes me in my experience and pushes against that, because that's how you understand and learn more about the world, is through when your
Hmm.
everyday and typical is encounters the weird in whatever form. And so that tends to be sort of where I get my highest dosages of weird
Yeah.
typically.
And- But also, anytime do you seek like maybe weird places to visit, or maybe you
Oh,
travel to, do you like this? Not on every day, but like
oh yeah. No, I think
sometimes when you
that.
travel, do you seek
Mhm.
like this weird stuff or?
Oh yeah. I definitely. I think that places hold a very uh, interesting sort of, they hold their experiences with them like on the wall. So I like to, like you said, when I visit, I want to go somewhere and see something that I can't see every day, that is unique to that place. And sometimes, those places can feel unsettling because they are so different than the everyday, be it old buildings or when I was younger, I did a lot more of the like going into more abandoned places or places you shouldn't. I don't do that as much anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe my adventurousness has gotten less as I've gotten older. Um, but I
Yeah, you're on the main level now, right? You're playing. Yeah.
exactly. But um, and a lot of times those experiences come from, I love when visiting a place. Um, it's really rich and rewarding to be there with someone who lives at that place, so they can sort of guide you through some of those experiences and show you things you couldn't just normally stumble upon on your own.
Yeah, yeah. And did you have any recent examples of place you went somewhere like this and
Um,
someone showed something that maybe inspired you
yeah, so
in a way?
recently I haven't been doing much far travel, but we live on the I live in Portland, Oregon, so in the Pacific Northwest, which is an interesting place because it doesn't take you very far to travel to have it change biomes, right? Like I can go to desert, I can go to mountain, I can go to coast, I can go to rainforest, all pretty within a day's travel. Um, and I've been spending a lot of time on the coast, which the Oregon coast is a very, it's different than others in terms of it's like very rocky, and you have these like massive trees overhanging a cold and sort of unforgiving coastline. And so as we've been going there, sometimes as little like weekend excursions, been exploring more and more places. And what you find is there tends to be, when you go on trails, sometimes there are trails that are less trodden, and they tend to sometimes go past things that have been reclaimed. And I think that sense of something that has been abandoned and reclaimed is very interesting, um, because when I have to think about and how that reflects into my work is like, you know, one of the biggest challenges is how do you do a dungeon in a modern world? Because like there's not dungeons everywhere, but there are places that are abandoned, reclaimed, and forgotten. And so those are really ripe for inspiration, especially when you stumble upon like a building that is um, overtaken by foliage, and you're like, when was the last time someone went in there? What is down
Yeah.
there? Did people leave? Like, why is this just left and forgotten? And those kind of questions tend to like sit and churn around in the mind. And then whatever answers I can figure out or come up with on my own sometimes will then spill into my work, because I'm like, okay, how could I use this?
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. I love doing that. Going to the nature and finding something and weird places and see how or seeing like some news or something happen like how if this was in this weird world, how would that be there? How would that be changed? How the force in that world would be acting through this
Mhm.
event sometimes, right? I love doing those thought experiences and see what I can come up with my game. And you mentioned developing the deluxe edition of Liminal Horror. Do you want to talk a little bit about this? What are your plans for this, and
Yeah.
what would be your favorite word thing that you're planning on putting on Liminal Horror Deluxe Edition?
Yeah, so that's been really fun to be working on. So that one is a true full collaboration between me and my three partners. So me and Josh Tomansky are doing the primary writing and layout. Um, Zach Hazard is doing art throughout, and then Jarrett Crater is our editor and publisher. And so we've been working. We meet regularly on it. The manuscript is getting close to being finished. Um, and what it is it takes all the like core rules that we have in the zine, and it has those, and then it does all of the sort of like essays on facilitation, how to create your own adventures, how to run things, and like really expands on not only like how to run and engage with the system, but then also a lot more lore, I guess is what you would call it. It's been fun. Everything we've been put out so far has been set in the Pacific Northwest, and this is sort of our last, not final, but this sort of collects that as a setting, which has been exciting. The weirdest thing, that for me that I included was we did a catalog of the strange, which is like our bestiary, and it was been fun to iterate on classic monsters and how they would show up in sort of a liminal horror lens.
Ah,
Liches might be my favorite because
yeah, that sounds cool.
I've been seeding that through all the adventures I've written, and so it's been fun to finally like sort of tie it together in a canon, anti-canon, because it's all been in my head, and now I've left clues around, and this will be the first time I sort of explicitly gather and be like, this is what this is, at least to me.
Yeah, this sounds amazing. I love to see the treatments of this. One of favorite things when I'm doing my games is like maybe getting something that we already know, in fantasy and horror or one of these genres. Say how can I completely maybe or not completely because there's always something there, but how can I maybe get to the essence of this and do my own interpretation of what this thing is in this world in this setting, you know?
Hmm.
And yeah, yeah. And so it's who is writing all this? Are you writing, or is like someone making the art and you interpret it? How is the
For
creation process
Yeah,
of
for
of
this
this?
process, so we had the sort of rules written, and then Josh has been writing a lot of the essay. Like what we end up doing is we tend to divvy out what we're writing, and then we edit each other's things, and then go in and add and sort of like build together. In terms of like the monsters, or we call them the horrors. I sat and I wrote a bunch of them, and then we're like iterating on that and fixing that, and then throw it to Zach to do his interpretation of it. And then whatever he draws for it is definitely going to, I will then use that in the editing of the monster. And like if there's
Mm-hmm.
things he noticed or changed or embellished or drew from, I will then use that to impact the end, right? Because it really is this back and forth conversation between all of us um, throughout. And so while one may do the first iteration, the final iteration will have had everyone's hands on it in terms of like
Oh, cool. Yeah.
what they find interesting. And sorry, my cat's tail just went right across the
Yeah. Yeah.
camera.
Yeah. That's all good. It's audio too, so yeah. we do some video snippets, but that's mostly audio anyway.
There we go.
I'm
Perfect.
loving seeing the cats just traveling around to your back and to the
Yeah,
shelves over there.
I have, like I said, I have multiple cats, but she sits at she loves when I'm at the computer, and so she loves it when I
Yeah,
write.
yeah,
She wishes I wrote more because she'll
yeah.
sit and just. I had to get a bigger desk as she's gotten bigger to like accommodate her space because if not, it spills onto the keyboard.
Oh yeah, I have one here too. That's when he gets the computer, he holds the left hand on the keyboard, so I can only type very few keys here. Yeah. And you talk about valuing ritual very much, and you talked about how you wake up early, do your stuff. But I mean, I want to ask you if you have any particular ritual for when you sit down to write or to do your work, your creative work. Do you do anything to help you get into the moods, to help you get that flow state or anything like this?
Yeah, so I've been, of course, I listened to the podcast, so I knew this was a question coming up, and so I had to really think about, okay, what is it that I do? Um, it's interesting. So like I'll sit. I usually will have predetermined if it's like a day where I'm going to work hours, like work quite a long time. Usually have to be on the weekends for me, and I'll have pre sort of scheduled it in my mind of like, okay, I'm going to wake up and sit
So
and
do you
do.
schedule? I was gonna ask you, do you schedule that stuff in your mind, or do you put it in your calendar stuff? Because I
Um,
sometimes there's so much stuff to do, like the freelance and my stuff and blah blah. Sometimes I have to put on the calendar. Oh, that day I will work on this project, and then get oh today I'm gonna work on this or not.
Sometimes I do put it in my phone calendar, but I always sort of put it in my mental calendar. I
Oh,
find,
mine doesn't work.
luckily, I'm not typically juggling too many projects, so it's more just like it's like writing time.
Okay.
Um, and so I'll sit down and I'll pull up the stuff, and I find once I get started, I just really hit that ground. I'll oftentimes put up music. I have a few. Uh, Funnily enough, I never listen to live music, but I have few live recorded concerts I'll tend to like put on um,
Mm-hmm.
and watch. But what I've found is when I'm really in the writing zone, um, if the music stops or the video stops, I'll just keep working. And then about like an hour or two later, realize I've been working in silence for the whole time. Um, because I just really end up getting into this
Yeah.
conversation with the work, right? And so that becomes my full focus. It happened enough that I finally like clicked into the fact that I'm like, oh yeah, I've been sitting in quiet for quite a while, but it doesn't really matter to me at that point because it was more about the getting started. And then once I get
Mm-hmm.
started, it's the trains left the station,
Yeah.
um, which is fun. It does make it so it's hard to do sometimes piecemeal things because, like I said, that when I get so focused, it just like keeps going when I'm writing, and then I'm like, okay, I'm
Do you forget to do other stuff you were supposed to do or stuff like that?
yeah, when I don't look at my phone for so long and then realize I missed some text from my wife or
Oh
things, and I'm like,
yeah.
oh no, because I'm just like
Yeah.
completely and focused, which is fun. That type of writing I can't do all the time, but
Yeah.
that tends to be where the bulk, like I get a huge amount of the big core skeleton out. Like when I was writing Hungry Hollow, I was recovering from I had just had deviated septum surgery, so I had some time off of work, and so I had more days where I could schedule writing. And I found, it was in a few large swaths of that I got a majority of the
Mm-hmm.
draft done. Because then what I have, as we've done this more and more, a lot of the time, a bulk of the time gets spent in the rewriting process. The
Mm-hmm.
drafting process I do like to just do in like a couple large swaths pretty quickly, and then more time spent like talking about different parts, or what do you think about this, like sending to Josh, what do you think about this part, or in that more conversation refinement stage.
I see. Yeah. And do you manage to work on this stuff every day, or because you mentioned doing large swaths, and I talked to here about consistency and intensity, and what I was asking is, do you work more with this intensity in a few days, or like you work every day and sometimes you have this big intensive day that you manage to pour out a lot?
So when it is a drafting time, it's the intensive phase, right? It's the okay, we're gonna
Okay.
have to work these hours. Like we had in April, we were like, okay, let's get the draft of deluxe edition done. So I had more of those days. When it comes to the refinement times, those are much more 30 minutes, an hour in the
Mm-hmm.
morning,
Mm-hmm.
and that. And so now even like talking with you, like realizing those are like the two different forms of writing. So that one, like the smaller one, is like, okay, let me work on some NPCs. So it's just like it's a focused,
Yeah,
targeted
yeah.
time of doing like 30-minute chunks. There was a month or two where I was doing in the morning I would watch an X-Files episode and do a little bit of writing, which was fun. Um,
Yeah.
that ritual fell apart a little bit, but I'm hoping in the summertime I can get that back up a little bit because one, I haven't watched that whole series and I've been wanting to watch it, and so tying it has been a fun little
Yeah. I have to go there and do that too. I watched it, years ago, episode here, episode there, sometimes more
uh,
consistent, but never the whole thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so that sort of um the watching something that working in the sort of small chunks, like those are more targeted refinement. Um, and that's
Yeah,
just how
yeah.
I found like it works for me, right? It's so
Yeah, of
interesting to
course.
hear how
That's
other
interesting.
people
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
Of like, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool how you go about this. Um, but I do find in my advice to people is like thinking about really what works for you,
Oh yeah.
whether it be in writing or art or when I work with students around learning, right? It's like we all have ways that work for us, and if we figure that out,
Yeah.
we can we can harness that better, and then we can build structures or supports to help us when we have to do things outside of that, right? And so,
Yeah.
knowing the more you can know yourself, the more I find that you can find success in sort of these endeavors.
Yeah. But also I ask this kind of questions to people because we can learn from each other, because sometimes I'm gonna try this that
Uh-huh.
Goblin is trying, or gonna try this that Richard is trying. Like, I love the idea of the Richard Ruane gave here about riding sprints, that you go out there, meet a friend in a cafe, you sit down, you work on your games for 30 minutes, you sit down and write, and after 30 minutes you stop, get a coffee, and talk about, oh, what did you work on, what you're doing, and things like this. It's very, it's about that thing you're saying about connecting, right? You're
Mhm.
working on your thing, but you're connecting. And even though maybe you're not working on the same project, you're kind of, collaborating in a way.
Mhm.
I'm not doing exactly that because we don't sit down and write together, but we work, during the week, and like almost weekly, I sit down with a friend. We talk about game design, and we talk about what we do work on this week, and we share problems and stuff like this. And the way you describe it, you sit down and start and write for hours. Uh, I can't really do that because of they job and kid and all my life, but
Mhm.
also my style of writing is kind of, I start writing, I'm writing like one two, but I get to a point and, oh, how do I say that? How do I, and I get up and then walk around and, oh, I already know how to express that, and come
Mhm.
back and then finish, and I get to other points. Oh, how can I say this better? And then go do something else, and that thing strikes, and then go back. I don't know if it's been working. It's really. Have you ever been able to sit down and write for hours, or has this been something that changes over time for you?
So I think it probably was from when I was in college, I was an English major, and a supreme procrastinator. And so I found I could not write those essays until like the last minute, and so I had to learn through the structure I had built. For whatever reason, I had been forced to like sit and pour into a project to get it to completion, um, to a
Mm-hmm.
usable part, and that would be a essay I would then turn in. Um,
Yeah.
and I think the years of doing that have, and I don't know if that's just because that's what works for me, or I
That's
just had
that's the
so much
power of the
practice.
deadline, right? The
The
power of
power
the
of the
deadline.
deadline,
Yeah.
right? And so, I at that point I couldn't. I was like, I couldn't start writing until the sun went down, and then I was like, okay, now I have to start working. Um,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
I've gotten older, it's shifted now to being like it has to be early in the morning, but that sort of um, rush of like working and just fully devoting yourself to that task at that one time, um, still I think is a carryover. And like I said, I don't know if that's just because that's how I always was, or that's just all those years of practice. That's sort of what I've become.
Well, they have books about this, right? The flow states and stuff like this. So
Yeah,
I think that's something good, and yeah, I
it's
should be looking more to times that I can get to do this and spend more time, reading and writing for longer periods. I think that would be,
mhm.
I don't
But
know.
I do think it does create its own difficulty too, right? Because like with a life so busy, as we get older, our lives get busier, or I felt that way.
Yeah,
More responsibilities, more things. My time is spent more places. That the actual amount of times I could do that type of writing is actually pretty small, and so
yeah,
then I have to really do that in that sporadic. That's also why a lot of timelines I set for the work that we're doing are a little bit longer than I don't know if they're longer than others, but they're longer just to accommodate for the fact that like life catches up. But then again,
yeah,
sometimes when it's like, oh, there's a deadline, I'll have to schedule time in a way that works. And sometimes I don't get to accommodate my um, process as much. So there's that give and take and that
yeah,
balance.
yeah. It's
Um,
always just balance act that you have to do, and that's why sometimes, you know, you talk about collaboration that helps you, and I already do some freelance, but I already have this pressure of deadlines in my work, and now I'm like, no, just gonna take my time because I don't know, it's already too stressful in all other areas. I don't want to do that
mhm,
with my work.
for sure. And
Yeah.
that's why, like we had talked with the deluxe edition, right? We've pushed it out multiple times, not externally, because there was never a promise of ever any time until we sort of recently had a more like, okay, this is
Yeah.
when we're doing it. But giving the right amount of time for things is helpful if you are able to,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's a privilege of being able to with those
For
projects.
sure. For sure.
Of being like, it's not ready yet, so we're gonna still
And
wait.
be safe too, right? Be safe too. Do not create this pressure and people expecting you to receive something.
Oh yeah, and
That
like
thing you said, like prepare for life because life happens, and like, yeah, we
right,
probably will finish by July, but let's say September, just to give some leeway or something like this, right?
right, and so like specifically, so the Hungry Hollow is our next adventure we're putting up. I think like in June 3rd, I think, is the date that we're going to
Mm-hmm.
launch the backer kit. Um, as that project got closer to completion, then we're like, okay, we're going to set a release date. But even that we've moved because we want it to be as close to finished as possible
Mm-hmm.
when releasing, um, to not create that like post pressure, right?
Yeah.
And that's personally just because I personally don't know if I could handle that.
Yeah.
So I would just want to be like, I want it as close to done when it's finally time for the marketing stuff, which, like you said, like is a unfortunate aspect of
Yeah.
creating. Um, that oh yeah, we also get to be marketing directors as well as all the other
Yeah.
hats.
We don't have an agent to promote our work or
I
anything
know,
like
right?
this.
Oh
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
gosh, table TTRPG marketing agents. I don't know if that'd be good or bad, but it's you learn it, and there are things that come easier as you've practiced them, and there's just
For
stuff
sure.
also
Yeah.
where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
another promo post. Woo!
Yeah. Goblin, something else that I always ask here is that maybe if you can, as a creator, can you identify any main sources of inspirations for your work? I know as creators and artists, you're always drawing every experience, everything we consume. Like you said, a lot about movies and books. Uh, but I, for example, draw a lot from the stuff that I consumed as a childhood, which was kind of my refuge from a confusing world. Do you have anything for you that you see yourself constantly going back to and trying to draw ideas from? It could be a period of life or maybe a subset of culture, anything like this.
Yeah, I think two things, right? Growing up, I was a pretty voracious reader. I don't know if I would say it was like escapism, but to me, a book was like if I was given an option of anything to do, the book would be what I always chose. Maybe it's just because like my mom read to me, like we would read fantasy stories to me growing up, and then I got to start reading them myself, and there's that like love there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that time spent in imaginary worlds. And a lot of what I was reading was like fantasy and sci-fi, in my sort of adolescence, like
Mm-hmm.
anything I could get my hands on. So all of that time spent in those sort of fictional worlds. Then when I wasn't reading, I did a lot of like not imaginary play, but like I would think through stories. They tended to be very similar to the things I was reading, right? I was pulling so heavily from that.
Yeah.
But like in telling similar stories over and over and iterating them to like get them to like this perfect like, oh, what if this was a book? Oh, what if this was a movie? And so I would think through um that. And what's funnily enough is that's a similar way that I do writing modules now, like really mirrors that sort of imaginative thought experiments that I would just sit with my imagination with. And I'm like, oh, I could actually do this and create things myself. Um, and then if I want to think of a specific work, um, there was a moment when I was like in my teens where I was explaining how a movie worked, how they did a shot in a certain movie, and my dad was like, "You really know a lot about this. Like, have you ever thought about doing film?" And hearing that from him really sort of like got my mind primed to do that, and I started exploring film a little more. It's a thing I've since not really done for various reasons. Um, but at that same time, I really fell in love with The Evil Dead 1 and 2, and I got this book that I've tried to find since, and it's like out of print. That was sort of like a story about how they made it. And reading about how these like young kids, like in their 20s, right, came together, made this movie in the woods, and created something to me was like beyond inspiring. Of like, oh, you can just go and do these things. It doesn't have to be this sort of big nebulous. Um, you don't have to have a lot of money. Of course, money and all that stuff's involved, but that sort of like that inspiration again of like, I could do this myself. And then fast forward to like when I heard Yohai talking about how you can make games, it's sort of like this invitation from people, or like this sort of like people paving the way, being like, you can do this too. um
Mhm.
I guess has really inspired me not only to do it but try to let others know they can as well, of like, this is a thing you can achieve if it's something you're into. It's not going to be easy, but with the right supports, like, you can make something for others.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great way to see how you can learn from each other and how you can grow together and how what you do can do the same thing for others. And it's all about the thing we were talking in the beginning, right? The connections, how we, as we work, as we play in the work we do, are always about this social thing that RPG makes. And then it kind of drives me to the next question would be asking, how do you see RPGs in this weird sphere? Do you see RPGs as something innately weird? And whether you do or not, what do you what is your favorite part of this game?
Okay, I think RPGs are weird. I think inherently, because as a form of storytelling art experience, there's not very many things that are truly generative together, like the game at the table, right? Not only is often, like, let's say you're running from an adventure, right? Someone could make something completely their own, but say you're running from an adventure. Like I ran Halls of the Blood King, right? I ran
Mm-hmm.
that for my friends. So you wrote that
Yeah.
with the art in that, and I took that book, and then through interacting with my friends at the table, through how I interpreted your words, we created something wholly new and unique together. We spent the time together. We sort of told a story that then had impacts to something we would do later, right? And had impacts to the characters that we had played when we had played. We took the characters that we had played from Hideous Daylight, Brad Kerr's OSC adventure, and then they did that, and then they went to the Hall of the Book. They did that next, and sort of like connecting those two through this through line of story, like that's not a thing that you really do with a book or a show or that. A lot of those are I yes, I interpret those as I watch them, but a game is something wholly different. Because there's that active exchange of time with your friends, of socializing, of like having fun together. And so that in itself is weird because it is so different. Um, and I think that I always try to remember that in the end, the tables, like play is what we're doing this for. This is what I'm doing it for. I'm trying to make something so people can bring it to the table and play with each other. Yes, you can sit and read the book too. Buy my books, read them, and never bring them to the table. That's fine. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's the reason why I personally, like, I put up all the rules. All the rules are free. Like you can get all my stuff for free. It's all online. It's posted. It's a site website you can search, that your players can search, because what I'm interested in is that experience of them together at the table. That's why I love hearing play reports of people, because hearing what they did, hearing how they interpret it, how they changed it, is just so interesting in a way that, like I said, I don't, other forms of media don't really do. And
Yeah.
so
And
games are weird, right? It's weird. It's different. It's like a social thing. Um, but it is also a thing you can sit and read to yourself, and that it functions in that way too. And that also is like different. And so I think, to me, they're exciting. It's fun.
yeah, now you're saying this, it made me think about something like RPGs are kind of the reaction videos before reaction videos existed, you know, because it's the only art you experiencing together with the creator. Like it's part of the artist, the art for you to go there and mess with it and play with it and see what happens, right? Because like a movie, you want everybody will see a movie and everybody will see the same ending of the movie. Like the movie will be the same, right?
Hmm.
Of course, you can interpret and experience in a different way, uh, but the events, if you narrate what happens, they're like and almost every art will be the same. Like the statue we will experience will also be the same. We will have different impressions of it, But the game, the RPG, is something that's we it's kind of unfinished art form, right? You
Yeah.
finish it yourself as you play it, and then you see what happens, and it will be different from everyone that plays the same thing, right? You it won't be the same statue, right?
It truly never, like almost never will be, right? Because yeah, like you said,
Yeah,
we interpret art. We each have our own like way we interpret it. But games, you then take that interpretation and throw it together and change things
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
drop stuff, and you're like, oh, that's not going to work for me, or we're not going to include that, or I'm going to include something completely different. And
yeah,
all of those are valid, and all of those hopefully are fun if done well.
yeah, yeah.
And are unique to that group, like that. What I played when I played your adventure with my friends is so uniquely to what we did, and it's a special thing that, like, in a memory we get to share, that no
It's a
one else gets to.
collaboration again.
Yeah, that no one else gets to. Like, I can tell them about it and that kind of thing, but like no one's going to iterate it the same way that we did there, just for sake of, we're just different
And
people who made different choices, who did
yeah,
this, and we can reflect and laugh about it still. And that's like this
yeah,
precious little gift that we were given, because not only do we get together for those few hours, but then we get to carry that memory too.
Yeah. And probably if you sit again to play the same adventure like in a couple of years, you'll make different characters and it'll be something completely different again. And
Hmm.
that's something you rarely can do, right? In other medias. Like I know, for example, when we watch a movie, we watch it like 15 years ago, that was something special for us. We will see the movie in a different way, right? But it's still there, and in RPGs, no, it will be always something new, which is it's kind of magical, I think.
Yeah, and it's I when we talk about games, I find myself doing too, like talking about things, but then sometimes forgetting to really bring it down to like it's about play. Like
Yeah, that's
it's
all
about
about
the
that. It's all
table. Like
about that.
it is if I wanted to write short stories, I could write short stories, right? What I want
Yeah,
to write is frameworks or adventures or things that give tools for people to create an interesting story. But
yeah,
I also like with that invitation that they can change, adapt, make it different. Like it's just
yeah.
it's fun.
That's
It's
the
a
medium.
cool yeah,
Yeah,
that's the medium and it's
that's
cool. And
yeah.
yeah,
Because for a while, because it's a new media, and for a while we had this we had reference from other media, so we thought about role playing games. We're telling stories, so it's kind of a movie and then a novel. So in the 90s, we have this very storytelling kind of bias to RPGs. So we had a lot of railroading, a lot of this very rich and detailed settings that would tell stories, and
mhm,
there was this idea that the GM sits down to tell a story, right?
mhm,
Uh, but I think you can do that, but I think if you want to explore the depths of the medium can do, it is about every time you play and people have the freedom to make the choices, even though there is restrictions inside the framework of the game, of the setting, what is possible, it has to be something that's open-ended,
for sure.
you know?
And like everyone's style is different too, right? Your player like the types of characters they play. I have a
Mm-hmm.
very specific facilitation style. It's a carryover from what I said earlier around like that when I dreamed of doing film. I describe things as though it is a film, like where the sometimes I'll talk about where the camera is, or like so we can interject all these interesting different styles and like people are what make TTRPGs fun and different and unique,
Yeah.
right? And we all bring a different way. And me running something is different than you running something, but
Oh yeah,
both are fun, right? And it's
for
just an
sure.
excuse to get together.
Yeah, yeah. It's different aesthetics of fun. There's different games will be fun for different people,
Uh-huh.
for different reasons. And as game designers, we always have our preference, but it's very good for to learn what is fun for different people, and maybe we can learn sometimes even if that thing is not fun for us. Like some people doesn't like the shared narrative kind of things that some more narratives game have, but maybe you can learn something from that, and you can subvert to make your game in a different way. You know?
Uh-huh. Or
Yeah.
if we're bringing it back to like how we write games, sometimes a constant thing I'll like talk with Josh about is sometimes like writing something in a certain way, remembering that this isn't written for me because I have it in my head already. I've written it so someone else can
Oh yeah.
understand. And that too is a thing that is slightly different, I think, when people think about how is putting a published thing out different than what I would write for my table. What
For
I write
sure.
for my table is going to be a lot more sparse because I've already pre-thought it. When I'm writing
Mm-hmm.
for an adventure for someone else, I need to give them things that I need to make things explicit or descript or whatever,
Yes.
so they
Explicit.
can
Yeah.
yeah, so they can understand because they don't have the schema that I had because I made it in my
Yeah.
head, right?
Yeah.
And so like certain descriptions that I wouldn't write in my GM notes are things I do need to remember to put. Um,
For sure.
but it is just fun. I love playing games. Just
Yeah.
go back. Like it's just fun. I know when you were talking with Irvin around, playing games regularly, and it's a thing that there are times where I'll notice if I haven't been to the table in quite a while, and I do feel like that sometimes negatively impacts my work if I haven't played recently. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and life gets busy. It's a privilege to be able to get together with your friends, and it's hard to run schedules.
Oh yeah.
but it's a thing as someone who works in making games that it's always important to like do that because just that's that constant reminder of what this is all for.
For sure. And I've trying more and more to do this and realize the importance of sitting down and experiment with the rules and modify the interactive game design thing, like to test down and come back and analyze it again and then do it because it makes the game so much better. And then playing other games too, you learn dynamics, you learn, and you, I don't know, it gets you into the field, right? And there you're more in
Ha-
sync with the game, I guess.
have you ever gotten the privilege of playing in a game you've written?
Yeah, once or twice. Yeah.
I find that's always a really fun experience and really illuminating. Um, and it's a big privilege, right? Usually I'm always the one who runs things often. Um, but being the experience as a player is also really important. But it is
Oh
something
yeah,
fun to
for
play
sure.
something you've written as a
Yeah.
player.
Not many people roll my games though, so yeah, it's hard.
I bet if you put out there, someone's gonna be like, "Oh, I'll run Primal for you."
Yeah. And Goblin, one thing I'm loving asking guests here now, it's kind of a new question. It's about, can you identify any maybe advantage or strength that you see yourself having that helps you in your work? That you see, oh, I have this and this really helps me uh, in this way or that way.
Um, I'm yeah, okay. I'm good at working with people. That's part of my day job.
Oh, cool.
I'm an educator, and so a good educator should be good at working with people. Um,
Absolutely.
I would hope. And so part of that is just being able to juggle and interpret the needs of other people, and then um, help facilitating other people into getting things done or learning or helping them through their needs. And I remember one time I was preparing for a, a, a meeting where we would go over some reading data and sort of there's an end goal there. And as I was getting ready, I was like, this has all of my practice as being a GM is helping me with running this meeting, and then running this meeting has helped me be a better GM. And sort of like honing those skills throughout the years around how to like work with others, collaborate with others, how to help. Like if me and you are working together, how do I help you achieve what you need to achieve? How do I be of best service to you, and vice versa? And I think that that's an advantage that I have, especially since I get to practice it
For
every
sure.
day. Practice it
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah, in a social game and in our community, that's very important too. And I sometimes have difficulty with this. Social cues are not really my strong suit. But yeah, I'm not very easy to work with. So uh, I thank everybody that worked with me for all the patience and stuff. So yeah,
And I think what's important. Like for some people are not gonna say better at, but like adapting
yeah,
to
it's
what the
different.
other what,
Yeah,
but adapting to what the other person needs, right? And I think that is also a
yeah.
skill around of like building a relationship with someone and realizing, oh, this is the approach you need from me. This is what you need
Mm-hmm.
from me for
Mm-hmm.
us to be successful collaborating, and then realizing this is a teaching tenet around what's the thing I can control. I can control my practice or like what I
Yes.
do. And so like when change needs to happen, what can I change? I can change how I'm approaching this situation, and just realizing how I can bring that into my game stuff
Yeah.
too, around like adapting to others is a
That's
necessary
very
skill.
stoic too. Yeah, that's very stoic too. Like the only thing I can control is myself or my approach, and that's very wise. By the way, and now talking about, we I asked you about your strength or maybe an adventure, but do you see anything yourself would you like to improve or to be better, and that could impact your work or make your work better in any way?
Um,
It's
This is
like
like
advantage and
this is like a what's
disadvantage,
your
you
this is
know.
like what's your strengths and weaknesses on a job
Yeah,
application. No,
it's a character sheet. No, we're
my
making a
character
character
sheet. Okay,
sheet.
yeah, my character
Yeah,
sheet. Sometimes I can rush into
no
something.
job application. We're artists. We don't have jobs. Like,
No jobs.
fuck
No, yeah,
jobs. I hate jobs.
this is our my character sheet, and so oh man, I got
Yeah,
a plus in this. What do I
it's
have a
fate.
minus?
Fate aspect. The fate aspect.
My
Like,
fate aspects.
yeah,
What
yeah.
are my
What's your
minuses?
complication? What's your
Oh
complication? Yeah.
man, I'll rush into it, and sometimes there's moments where pause is necessary, and I have to.
Oh,
It's that.
imprudence. You would say that.
Yeah, yeah. We'll put that on the character sheet. I like to push the button and then realize what that button was.
Oh yeah.
No, but rushing in, I think sometimes when there's a moment of taking the moment of pause, it would be
Did this
is
affect your work in any way, or is more something like in your life in general? But like in, do you see that
um
affecting your approaching in RPG in
yeah,
some
like
way?
RPGs of like really like getting an idea or something, and then especially this comes into play a lot like if you're working with someone else or like uh, like collaborating with someone you don't know very well, and then like rushing through and then
Mm,
realizing, oh, I should have taken a moment and waited, paused. Um,
yeah,
sometimes sometimes
yeah,
the wait a little bit before you run into it is important.
yeah, yeah. This week exactly, I was talking to my kid about. I think one of the most important skills to learn nowadays is the ability to pause, to wait, to sit still, because everything is so fast. Like entertainment, you click here, you get something, or it's very easy to receive news and react immediately. And sometimes we can be rude, we can be, insensitive, and having this ability to or make wrong decisions, right? And having the ability to just receive something and wait to react and wait to do something, or even the delayed gratification, right? To for us to make a game, it's not to watch Netflix. We can click a button and the game is done. That's what AI is, right? AI generative is click a button, and the
Yeah.
delayed gratification of sitting down and working something or waiting and thinking about it, it's always leads to something better, I think.
Yeah,
Than
yeah, and sometimes
uh,
my natural drive is to like, okay, let's do it now. Oh, let's put this out here this time, and that's why I help myself by surrounding myself with people who are like, okay, well, let's pause for a second and think
yeah,
through, and
but it's
okay, maybe
hard, you
it's
know.
hard because
It's
sometimes I'm
an
like,
ideal. It's
yeah,
an ideal. It's not something like, oh yeah, I'm always gonna be able to wait. Like this. It's very hard. Like these things. I love. It helps me to study stoicism, and that's always this very high ideal things. Oh, you have to do this and that, and it's impossible. And oh, it's damaging because you're never gonna be able to reach it. But it's. I know I won't be able to reach it, but it's just like a
mhm,
lighthouse in a storm that you can just point your boat
for
and
sure.
hope one day we'll get there, even though
Yeah,
you're probably just gonna be drowned by the waves. But
I know.
it's
Drown by the waves, buy the thing too quickly. Do the yeah.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
now I'm all like thinking about okay, let's a lot of self examination today.
yeah, 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 yeah. I love this. But see, this is my therapy. This is the connection. This is we learn from each other, and I've I love these things you're teaching and sharing. And do you do you remember what would be the weirdest game you played, or maybe a very weird game you played recently that maybe made you think different about games in general?
Weird game I've played recently.
It can be role playing games. It can be. Do you play video games? Do you play board games and other stuff?
I do play video games as well. I so do you know Disco Elysium?
Oh yeah, I bought it last week and
Yeah.
started playing
So
this
that
week.
wasn't necessarily super recent, but the way that game so it is an RPG, but it like is something so different in terms of like exploration of self, pushing
Hmm.
how pushing how the world interacts with the character, how external narration goes into play. And it's just so thoughtful and weird and funny. Um, I found it thoroughly inspiring in a way that I had no idea how I could use that inspiration. Right? Sometimes something so inspiring is like not in the way of like,
Yeah.
oh, I need to, because sometimes a limiter, I think, in writing games is I approach sometimes a lot of things of like, how could I take this and then utilize it? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes just taking a moment to like put that aside and be like,
That's the pause. Yeah.
how can I just experience this and enjoy this for what it is and be inspired
Oh
by it, but not in a way of like,
yeah.
I'm going to utilize this for that at all. So
Do
not
you
for
have a
my,
hard time doing that? Like turning off the analytic brain while you're watching something?
I watch a lot of reality TV with my wife, and so I don't approach that necessarily with that. But when I watch like a film or like
Mm-hmm.
specifically that potentially could be, I do tend to step into that like wanting to take notes, wanting to be like, oh, how could this show up in a game? How could this show up in an adventure? And so yeah, I do think sometimes I forget to. I still
Yeah.
enjoy it and experience it because that's my wife. You can do two things at once, but sometimes, and
Oh,
I
I
found with
can't.
disco, yeah, I can enjoy both at that, but
Great that you can.
I
That's a
found,
problem for me.
yeah, I found that um, with that work specifically of just like really just being trying to be like, let me enjoy this for what this is and be inspired by it and challenged by it, but not really think about my own games at all. And I guess sometimes that turning off that switch can be hard.
And that's a for me to do this. It's a conscious effort. I have to stop and do that because otherwise I'll have an idea, and that idea will start thinking, and
Mhm.
I'm not paying attention anymore.
Uh-huh.
I'm on the idea right now. I'm looking at the screen, but
Yeah.
I'm on the idea right now.
It's sometimes
Yeah.
but sometimes I'll put something up specifically to be like, okay, I want to be
Oh
inspired
yeah.
for games with that,
Yeah.
and that's a
Yeah.
fun
Yeah.
experience for me too, of like
Mm-hmm.
engaging with the work on that way. But
Yeah.
just
Do you,
and
have,
it's
do you sit down to take notes when you do that? Like
yes,
sometimes when I do that, I sit down for a notes
oh
book
yeah,
and just
I,
yeah.
I, I take notes on my phone. I have a notes app that I up, and I just like fragments of an idea, an image. Something
Mm-hmm.
happens on the screen, and so I'll like in 3 words that, and then I'll
Yeah.
put it there to gestate for later.
Oh.
But then,
And I Google search and I connect with something else and I see another note in the past. Oh, this reminds me of something else, and
mhm,
yeah,
mhm.
yeah,
And that because that is how I do a lot of my like generating ideas for my work. And so that is an important part of my process. But again, it's important to remember sometimes I need to just also enjoy a thing for what it
yeah,
is
yeah,
and
yeah,
not think about how I could iterate it into my own work.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, there's some stuff that I usually don't do that. I watch a lot of comedy and stand up and stuff. So a lot of
Uh-huh.
this usually is not gameable material, But
For sure.
sometimes I get inspired by it too. Yeah. Hello, wonderful weirdos. This is Diogo Nogueira again, and today I'd like to talk to you about one of my favorite games, a game that I created. And if you listen to the podcast, I love dinosaurs, and it's called Primal Quest. It is a weird stone and sorcery adventure game. It's a NSR game, which is this game that caters to the old school style of play, but has more modern and more cinematic gameplay adapted to our modern sensibilities. It has adventure with dinosaurs, ancient civilizations, spirity, sorcery, aliens, elder gods, and much, much more. It's very pulpy. It has, a complete rule set, a mini hex crawl, an adventure introductory adventure. You can find it at Exalted Funeral, itch.io, Drive-Thru RPG, and your best local game store. And we're releasing more and more stuff for it, so stay tuned and play Primal Quest. So let's get back to the weird with our chat. And do you have any other hobbies besides role-playing games? That you maybe something creative that you do just for yourself?
Um in terms of being creative, this is my primary like hobby. I think,
Mm-hmm.
going to play games, um, I think that's funnily enough, when I'm running a game, I'm thinking less about like game design and more just about the table experience. I try to keep that a very like that's what that is. And so I do feel like those are different, my game writing versus my game playing.
That's like the film and analyzing film again. Like, do you
Yeah,
play
it's like
analyze the game or do you
am I-
play enjoying the game?
right, and cuz and part of that is because if I'll talk sometimes with like my table afterwards a little bit about it, but on a
Oh yeah.
whole, when I'm showing up to the table with my friends, like this is our experience. It's not mine only. So like let's play this together. And so I try to give that my full um hobby. I've really gotten into weightlifting in the past few years.
Nice.
Something it wasn't a thing ever growing up that I was very into terribly much physical activity, but that has been really fun and rewarding, and I would call a hobby.
Awesome. That's great, and it's good for you. It's exercise. It helps you get out of your head too,
Mm,
and yeah. And go ahead. You're
no.
saying something or no? We are I know past an hour and 15 or something, and now I would like to maybe ask some personal questions about your life or maybe the stuff you believe and had experience with. And one of the first questions I always ask here is about spirituality and religion. And first of all, do you believe in God? Or do you have any kind of religion, or do you follow any philosophy that helps you navigate this weird world we live in?
So I was, if I'm gonna get really like honest about all of it, I was raised a Mormon. Uh, it was something that as I got older, like in when I was like 13 or 14, reading a lot, um, thinking objectively sort of about my relationship to that, I came to the end where I realized that that was not something that I believed in, and so I had left. So I have that sort of background experience inside that community, and then that experience of leaving that community and belief structure, and sort of I'm not going to say go fend for yourself in terms of like beliefs, but really taking the time to root myself in what I believed, which was ended up being all really, and I don't know if there's a word for it or anything in that, but around like how people treat each other and sort of I guess not self determinism, but like sort of driving of like doing what is right for what's right's sake, not an external thing. Um, uh, yeah, and
Yeah.
so um, currently now, no, but I do, in the work that I do outside of games, a lot of is around how can one be of service to others in the community and help others be their best selves and uplift for the sake of because I believe is the right thing to do. Right. I am made better by helping the people around me also succeed. And so that's where
Yeah.
I find a lot of my drive in that in the belief that others um, people at our core are great and have such potential. And like I know that there's a lot rough that goes on in the world, like a lot. I interact with it a lot
Yeah.
through my
Yeah.
work as well. But the potential of what we can create, what we can do, just sort of like the joy of human interaction that to me is just where I root my time and what I strive to do.
For sure. And I have a couple of questions. First of all, you said you left the belief and stuff, the church, but you do you still consider yourself someone who believes in God, in some sort of spirituality, or is just or when you left all everything behind?
I think it's the latter in terms of like and the reasons why and grappling with and the texts I read and like the stories I read around like choice and how we can
Mm-hmm.
and how we are always constantly offered choice and like to do the right thing or the wrong thing and sort of that natural drive and how we can do. Um, I find like as I got older, left sort of that sort of spirituality behind, but I'm still firmly rooted in like how people interact and how I interact with
The
others.
the usefulness of the good things is too stuck with you, but like the mysticism is something that you left behind.
Yeah,
What you're
I
saying.
think so. I think, and um yeah, I think it's just more I where I find my joy and my drive and the reasons why and
Yeah,
my belief in other people and the
yeah,
potential that other people have tends to be the
that's
bigger
great.
drive for me.
And was the community, the Mormon community inserted one was really about that, about the service to others, or was something that
You
you learned it
know,
from your parents? Where did you learn about this service
I
to
think it's
other
from I
things?
think that's through my parents. I think there's aspects of that. A lot of groups, and communities do hold community aspects and service to others, but then there are other tenets that sort of pushed me away from that, and in that group specifically. But I do think that it's through my parents, right? A lot of what they work in, it's through what drove me to become an educator,
Hmm.
and just the positive parts of academia. There's negative parts, but like
Oh yeah,
my dad was a librarian, so growing up in libraries, my mom was a teacher in schools, and those two institutions specifically also have negative aspects to them, but are also places that are served to uplift and give knowledge to others and help others be as successful as they could be, or learn or push them. And so I think that also comes into play a little bit for me. I worked a lot. Goblin Archives part. I was an archivist and worked in books and how texts connect each other and how um, spaces that don't cost and where people can just be and exist and grow and thrive um, really were pretty formative for me.
yeah, yeah. Wow, that's a great way to grow from this and learning in a very useful way and living what is damaging, what is not useful for you, and it's an analytic eye of the design too, right? And see, oh, this is useful for me. This I'm gonna take, and this
Hmm.
I'm gonna leave behind. And and what about other, maybe supernatural experiences? Have you ever had any maybe weird encounters with the supernatural out there? Maybe ghosts, aliens, or maybe cryptids? Have you ever went
I
to like
wish,
the
but
abandoned places you went
I think,
as
yeah,
younger?
abandoned places, because there's like a feeling to there that you don't feel anywhere
Yeah,
else.
liminal spaces. Yeah.
Liminal spaces, right? I think if I have to think about like the weirdest thing, like objectively thinking about growing up, we lived at this home. It's like it was 2 stories, wood homes, like a lot of creaky and that. And I would stay up really late, a thing I can't do anymore. But I would stay up really late reading into well into the night. And if I had to like go somewhere else, I am someone who likes the dark. I liked it like pitch black to fall asleep. But there was something about walking around that home in that old building at night in the dark with the creaking and that like had a settling sense of unease. And it's weird because this is a place that I felt very comfortable. It's my home. I loved growing up there. Um, but there's something about that weird 3 a.m., 2 a.m., and then it's dark. And there's something about that darkness that's different than when it's like dark that makes me comfortable to fall asleep that I just, you know, I still don't, I haven't felt that often. Sometimes I might feel that if exploring an abandoned place. And there's like this weird sense of that feeling, and how you can feel uh, that in a space that you don't, it's just, yeah, I think that part is just really interesting in reflecting on like why did it feel that way at that time consistently, like all the time at that 2 a.m.
Yeah.
nighttime, where it didn't feel at any other hours of the day. It's not like I was afraid of the dark, and there's just something about this old home that at that time gave this sense of almost unease or dread. um
Yeah.
and that's
Do you have
not
any theories what it was? You Do you ever try to rationalize it in any way?
No, because I tend to be a very like rational like person of like, oh,
Okay.
it's may just I must just be tired and the way it's creaky, but like like, and that's me being objective of like, oh, that's why. But like sometimes spaces take on a feeling that you just can't explain. And so that
Yeah,
home
yeah.
at those witching hours or whatever had that feeling um
Yeah.
that could only be experienced at that certain amount of time. And of course, I read a bunch of fantasy and stuff, and they always talk about like
Yeah.
like oh the moon's in a line and this, and like there's part of it like is it sort of magical? I'm not sure. Um,
Mhm.
but it is interesting in like how spaces can hold a feeling and sort of impart that on a person that can only be not really replicated somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah. And I've talked about this in the podcast before, and like, as it's you don't believe in the supernatural, you don't believe in God and stuff, and tend to be very rational, as you said. But as a creator, as someone that writes about horror, do you think it's also important to leave at least that 1% of doubt, took it all the way there to just, yeah, this is weird, maybe just just for an inspiration for the stuff that we make. I'm atheist, and but I kind of agnostic. Like, yeah, I hope I'm proven wrong, and there's something weird out there, and it's kind of this shadow of a doubt that we leave there just to help us uh, be more believable when we're making our stuff. Do you think that's a thing?
Um, I think that I'm not, and this is a very rational answer for me too, of being like, of course I can't know everything, right? And
Yeah.
there are things outside of my knowledge that are science, right? Like in my understanding and how we interpret things. And so yeah, of course there's that 1%, right? Because if I said 100%, that would be pretty brazen of me to be like, I know everything all the time, always. Um, when it comes to like the horror and the weird in writing, I think bringing it back to how the everyday juxtaposes against something that is weird and outside.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I think a lot of the tension comes from in my work. Um, and then also presenting players with making difficult choices, right? How do you push that character or that player to make a difficult decision that will then impact going forward?
Yeah, yeah. That's hard way to decide that. And the thing that you said about the focus on playability, right? How can you make this weird something that can interact with in a way?
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And now, have you ever had any kind of weird? Do you seek weird experiences in your life? Have you ever had any kind of experience with deep states of meditation, or maybe like a trance, or out of body experiences, near death experience, anything?
Um, yes. So growing up, I was definitely in my teens. Like a daredevil almost, right? Like I
Mm,
would do drive fast and do ride things down and like that kind of like capturing that rush of like now looking back I'm like that was wildly dangerous. Um and then I hit 17 and I have Crohn's disease and it took a while for us to figure out what it was. And I was got really, really, really sick and sort of in that weird state of like sort of almost body falling apart. Um, Spent a lot of time thinking and reflecting and like living in those sort of finding refuge in like stories and things of that nature. And then and that's probably my biggest experience in terms of that sort of like trance like that sort of experience outside the norm,
mm-hmm.
as my body is sort of falling apart as we're trying to like put it back together as we're trying to find out what's
Wow.
wrong and trying to understand sort of what my place in all of it is and like what my future can be now and like figuring that out. Spoiler alert, I have meds that make everything fine. I'm like I live a very um, my life is very minimally impacted by my chronic illness, which is great. But at 17, that was a really formative experience in terms of like having to think about what is it that I want, finding not only refuge of like from the experience, but then realizing like the work it's going to take to put my body and myself back together in a way that like
Wow.
going forward. It definitely changed. I definitely became a very different person pre and post that experience. And a
Yeah.
lot of that was spent in that like you were saying sort of like meditative state almost, I guess would be the closest way to put it.
Yeah. Do you think you it changed the way you approach your life? You became more present, more conscious, more
Um
grateful for being here and stuff
I
like this?
think
Because that's something a lot of people talk about when they
yeah,
go
I think
through.
at that time I was like working two jobs and I didn't even realize I was getting sick. I was just, I was you're 17 and right and
Yeah. Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
doing stuff and you're not as like self-reflective and it really
For sure.
forced that not only self-reflection but like making some decisions, right? It forced me to have to make some decisions that would impact
Yeah.
the rest of my life around being like, okay, what is it that you want to do and what do you want to commit yourself to? Because the stakes got higher.
Yeah.
And so I do think it definitely changed how I approached myself and approached others.
Yeah. Wow. Sorry, I had to go through that, but it's great to see that you're okay. That you managed to
Yeah,
grow from that, and then it's always weird. Like it's the stuff the greatest pains we have. It's sometimes the greatest lessons we have to. I mean, would you say? Would you agree with that? Or it's obviously much better we didn't have to go through any of this.
for
You
sure.
know?
I think, it took there's, growing up a lot of years of like just sort of like putting together but not really reflecting on the why and now so many
Yeah.
years removed
It
looking
only
back.
makes sense after years, of
Right, but like
course.
thinking about it, I'm like,
Of
yeah, it is a
course.
pivotal experience and oftentimes when we are forced to make choices that have large impact or large stakes, it is a change. And I think it was pretty formative for me, not only in forcing me to find value or commit to something, but then also like how I viewed the world and how I viewed others and how people came around me to like help and realizing, okay, and like this is what matters and this is what doesn't. And I think that has like it can't have not changed the course
Hmm.
of my life because it happened at such a
Yeah,
transitional
yeah,
time, right?
yeah.
It was my senior year of high school, right? Like it was like I was about to go out into the adulthood world and like this massive change happens. Um,
Wow.
and I feel like I am better for it. I would not wish it upon anyone, but I do think that
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. That's
we
weird, right?
yeah, we take from our experiences, like our experiences are what make us because they forced us to make the decisions that we made and have the impacts from those.
Yeah. It's so weird sometimes to think about this stuff and like this bad stuff that happened to us that we wish had never happened, but that we grew so much for it, and then say, "Ah, would you change something in the past?" And like, yeah, but no, I don't think I would change
No,
that.
right? Like, because I love like, it's like,
It's yeah.
and I think about someone was asking me about it because they're asking about my games and that kind of thing, and I was just like, teenage me would be so impressed, right? Like, making games, doing stuff that other like it is a dream come true
It
doing what
is.
we're
Yeah.
doing, right? And so I'm like, why would I trade anything that got me to this point that would have made young me
Yeah.
like couldn't
Yeah.
have even dreamed about the one who's like, oh, I want to make movies or a story. I'm like, I'm getting to do that.
Yeah, the
Um,
butterfly effect scares me. Like if I change just one thing,
oh
I
yeah,
can lose all of this. Fuck
right.
no. I'll
No,
I'll I'll, I'll get everything I got. That's fine.
time
You
travel
know.
stuff, that is the true horror, right? Time travel and how
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
change.
Yeah. Goblin, something also asked here. since you said that it's the most weird experience you had, probably not be any answer in this, but have you ever had any experience with altered states of awareness, whether to deep states of meditation or the use of psychedelics or anything like this, and saw anything different that made you think in a different way?
No, other than that, like near death experience that really, I think,
Yeah.
um, while not, I can't like describe like a visual thing it did. It created a form of self reflection that I don't think I would have
Yeah.
achieved otherwise as a 17-year-old
Mm-hmm.
kid who was just more
Yeah.
worried about getting to his jobs and getting through high school. Um, and it's
Yeah.
interesting to like view yourself in any, you know, I think that experience or like the experiences you describe where you view yourself outside of yourself in terms of like try to
Mm-hmm.
objectively look and see the way maybe others see you or see yourself in a way you don't typically see yourself,
Mm-hmm.
can be very beneficial and scary and and positive or negative. But it's like we have our own internal view of ourselves that we carry, whether it's right or wrong or accurate. And sometimes having that challenged can be beneficial.
For sure, it's the different perspectives, right? Because it's almost like we're this 3D creature, but we only see on one angle, so we're really
Right?
seeing a 2D representation of ourselves, and like everybody else seeing us. If we are able to see from their angle, maybe we can form a more completely portrayal of not only us but the world itself. Like this, there's people that think the way they experience and see the world is the way the world is, but like everybody else experiencing this in different way. Like this about religion, like oh, this is my religion and this is my God, and you go to heaven if you do this. Oh, okay. So everybody else in the world that lives in a different age, that lives in a different country, that speaks a different language, that looks different to you, they just go to hell because they didn't have the opportunity to be at their. It's this very egotistical way of seeing things, like this only one way, right? And then you all the full picture can't be seen by a single person, right?
hmm And like
Yeah.
it's also when you think about how everyone comes with their own perspectives and life experiences and how they view it. If thinking from a very like singular point, right? Like interacting and building those connections with other people can help you see yourself through their eyes and vice versa, right? And that's a nice part of like friendship. Like true friendship is I can help you see something in yourself that you might not see but I
Yeah.
do, and
Yeah.
vice versa, and that's also part of this exciting part
Therapy
about
too. It's kind of
yeah,
therapy.
right,
Too.
or
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
um and that's also why games are fun because you get to take on new perspectives because you're
Yeah. I
playing
was
a
gonna say that.
character, and so like you that's also a fun part about how games interact and can help process ideas and things because you get to do things you wouldn't do in your normal life, be a person you wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily play, just
It's a safe
navigate
safe
experience,
space to try this.
yeah, and have
Yeah.
fun and explore stories right in a safe way.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it should be.
Or
It
should be
should be
right,
safe.
and
Yeah.
we say should be
Yeah.
right, and like with
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
proper tools and trust in people,
Yeah.
it's fun to experience those things and
Yeah. Yeah.
explore them and play
And
games
talk
that have
about it.
and
Yeah.
talk about it, right? And play games that have different outcomes or like modes or like this one's about being heroes and that's fun to explore, and this one's about having your characters like it's going to go real rough for them and that's fun too to tell and explore, and the
Yeah.
games let that happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. Goblin, do you remember your dreams, or do you dream a lot? And if you do you take notes of them and try to steal from yourself in this way?
I have pretty mundane dreams. Sometimes I'll have exciting ones that are like something like that might happen at the table, but often they're much more mundane. Um, Sometimes, and this is my biggest terror ones, are when they are really normal and repetitive. Um, and that usually arises when something is causing stress in the life. Like I had a
Mm-hmm.
really bad dishwasher job um, when I was younger, and for all kinds of reasons, it wasn't good. And I would dream about washing dishes at night, which then just pretty much extended like this is my whole life, right? I can't escape it. And so
Wow.
sometimes when those things bleed in, like those negative things bleed into dreams, that can be unsettling. But it's funny that some of the worst ones are pretty mundane.
Yeah. Now you're saying this gonna make me an adventure, a horror adventure, maybe spirits that haunt something. You can't stop doing your house chores, or you're gonna start cleaning the dishes, and you can't stop, and
Mhm.
you clean so much, or like cleaning your skin off your
Right,
your
it's like
hand or something like
that
this.
Sisyphusian, like
Ah,
constant loop that you can't escape, which is scary. Like, is
ah,
hard. One of the best things about life is like most tasks end.
ah. I we joke here is like we have the accursed item, the sink of unending dirty dishes.
Yep. It's just like you can't stop and just you can't
Can't stop.
stop,
Just
and that's
keep
like,
coming. You finish one, another one just shows up. It's dirty again. Yeah. And if you could choose instead, if you could choose what you're dreaming about, what would you choose to dream about?
hmm. Um, I think that dreaming about exploring places would be exciting. It's not a thing I like. I said sometimes we'll like walk and do, but it's not a thing I typically do. Um, Architecture is a thing I have a big passion for in terms of like awe and inspiration, and so being able to like engage with that in dreams, I think would be pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. And seeing how you could explore that and kind of your own self dungeon and
Right, like I
mixing
just
with
want to
the
do a solo dungeoning as I go
yeah
to sleep. I'm not a big
solo
into
journey
solo.
game for when you
Right,
sleep. Yeah.
right. I'm not big into necessarily solo play, but I wouldn't mind doing that as I sleep. I think that'd be fun, exploring dungeons and things.
Yeah, yeah. And now a more whimsical question would be if you could, live in any fictional world, any of those worlds from our games, from fiction, from movies, from comics, and where would you choose to live, and who would you be in that
Where
universe?
would I choose to live? That is a great question. Oh man, is this for a peaceful life or is this for an adventurous
And
life?
anything you want, you're like, yeah, oh yeah, fuck yeah, I wanna be, a Jedi during the Clone Wars, or I don't know,
You
I wanna
know,
be.
definitely none of the horror books I ever read. That just sounds really hard. I don't play it much, but I pull a lot from the inspirations because I read all those books that are on its inspiration list. Mouse Ritter, living in a Mouse Ritter world would be pretty cool, right? It's sort of like
As a
ours.
mouse.
It has a mouse, it's sort of like
Oh
ours,
yeah.
but in like a totally new scope. Like I think
With
that would be
giants walking around.
with giants walking around, sort of that like day to day life. If I had to live I would want to do the typical like farmer become adventurer style. I'm a mouse that
Yeah.
just like goes on an adventure. I think that would be pretty cool.
Awesome.
It
Awesome.
has
And
the right
now,
amount of horror, but not like full blown because
yeah,
large things are
yeah,
terrifying. But
yeah.
that sense of
But
adventure
it,
too.
it has a whimsical because of the game. I imagine some kinds of whimsical feel to it, but it can be pretty freaking scary if we take it
Right, I think it has
that
all that,
way.
so I
Yeah,
could lean into whichever way you want. I think that'd be pretty
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah. And the other way around, if you could get anything from this weird fictional worlds and universe and make that thing real in our own universe, our own world, what would you choose to make real and why? And that the thing can be, an object, a person, an entity, a faction, a location, source, power source,
Love me some
anything like this.
wizards. I think a wizard would be cool, like a real traditional big beard, weird experiments
Oh
wizard.
yeah.
I think could introduce some brevity and some excitement.
Oh yeah. I've been reading Terry Pratchett now, and I love this saying that like wizards and scientists are the same thing, but the wizard has no idea what they're doing, so they call it magic. You know?
Exactly. Let's just throw some wizards into Silicon Valley, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. And if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you choose to have, and what would be the first thing you would do with that?
Love me some teleportation.
Yeah. Where would you go?
Oh, where would I go? The mundane answer is I would just never really have to. There'd be no like I could get to work right away. I could do that. Um, but the exciting part, if I want to do an exciting answer, is that you could truly visit places that like no one else gets to see, right? Or
Yeah.
like
You
spaces
could
that like
click on Google Maps somewhere and like, yeah, I'm gonna go there. And
yeah.
you go there.
And then the and then the nice answer is I could then play games in person with friends that are around the world. That part would be cool.
Yeah. If you could take them with you and like, hey, let's play with B A, B, and C, and let's just
Yeah,
grab everybody.
let's go get Pierre from
Yeah.
Montreal. I'll get Eco and get you, and then just have a
Let's
game
play at
like
Central Park, or let's play at near the Eiffel Tower or
right.
something. Oh, we're gonna play this scenario on this city, so let's go play there.
Yes, yes, because
Yeah,
when you can draw, I find when you can draw from a city that you're either in or people have experienced is super exciting.
yeah, yeah.
And also,
I
I love
love.
heists, so
hmm I
teleportation
love
heists go
I
perfect.
love playing horror and like this in modern settings here in my city because when I play with oh yeah and we are at that bar, oh yeah, I love that
Hmm.
bar, is someone there, yeah, they're on the counter, and like we interact with the characters from our city, and it's
Yeah,
always fun.
it's the first Liminal Horror I ever ran. I had like written. It ended up being Plague of Frogs, like the little adventure that I had put in the first book. Um, but like started in a 7-Eleven on Foster that like we had all just been to that day. So when I described it, like I only had to just say that, and they were already transported to the world because they've experienced it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so
I'm
there's
I'm
something
hoping
about
to make a
play.
game about Rio someday. Go ahead, go ahead.
No,
Something
you
about
should
play.
though, because
Yeah,
it creates a level of like when people talk about cities being alive, like it's almost like it's cheating, right? Because like you're drawing from a city that is alive, that has
yeah,
that sort of like I don't have to infuse that sort of everydayness to it because it already has it. And that is the fun thing about doing any sort of modern pulling from, especially something that you have schema for and experience for, because your the expectation's already there, it built into the mind of the player or the
yeah,
reader.
yeah. You don't even need an adventure generator. Just pick up the newspaper today and let's see what the fuck is going on. Yeah. And Goblin, the last question I have here prepared for you is: do you remember the last time you just felt really happy? Just grateful for being here and being alive. And if you do, can you share with us what is that you were doing and when was it?
It was we my brother and his wife had their first baby last year, and so we got to do first their first Mother's Day, and then my family was there, and seeing this little baby sort of experience the world in a way of like with this freshness and joy is just pretty exciting and is pretty nice, and it's like just pure happiness. I think that experience uh, also like being on
Yeah.
here, getting the excuse to sit with you to talk for 2 hours about games is fun, is just exciting.
Yeah, I love this. Yeah, yeah. It is my thing. Sometimes it's the thing that gets me, through a rough day and sit down with people here and yeah, and
Yeah,
connecting. Yeah.
like I had a really hard week this week at my work, but I knew that I was like I was like I have Diogo on Saturday, and then Josh and I are doing
Wow.
a horror writing seminar tomorrow, and so I was like
Oh
I get
yeah.
I get 2 days of just talking about games, and that to me is one of the big reasons why I do this, is to be able to do stuff with other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Horror seminar. Talk a little bit more about this. Where is it? Can
Yes.
people see it?
Yeah, so
How
we're
is?
gonna do it on the Weekly Scroll is hosting it. and so they'll live stream it, and
Ah.
then they'll put it up on
I-
YouTube afterwards,
Is it
and then
tomorrow?
yeah, it's tomorrow
Ah.
at 11 Pacific time. But then of course they'll post it to their podcast and they'll post it
Yeah.
to that, and it's
So if people are listening this happened in the past. So
it happened in the
there will be
past.
links on the show
Yeah,
notes.
there'll be links. We're doing it because we're launching Hungry Hollow, which is we call them twisted classics. They're like reimaginings of classic adventures or media.
Mm.
And the parthenogenesis of Hungry Hollow is a reimagining of N1 against the cult of the reptile god,
Mm.
but with flesh bees, and
Nice.
it's set on the coast. It's pretty great. So we did a jam that sort of invited people to like take do a modern reinterpretation, reimagining of a classic. It could be classic film, classic book, classic adventure. Um, Sort of like what they were doing for the bastardized classics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and So we are doing a little horror seminar on like how to adapt a mystery. We're pulling some of the information that we have from the deluxe edition to sort of as that framework, and just sort of talk through the process of
Oh, very nice.
how Josh and I approach taking a work and then how you can harvest it for parts to make it your own.
Yeah, that's great. It's 11 a.m. tomorrow or
11
11
a.m.
p.m. tomorrow.
11 a.m.
Pacific.
Pacific time. So
Okay. Yeah. So for me, it's probably one, one,
I think so.
one or three. One of those.
It'll be 4 hours past when we
Oh, so it's
started this time.
3 p.m. here in Brazil. So yeah, I'm gonna see if I can catch that. Yeah.
Yeah, it should be
Awesome.
good. The guys over at the Weekly Scroll are great, and then this should be a
Oh
fun,
yeah. I
just
love
way
them.
to talk about
Yeah.
process, right? And how we approach it and how we did it. Which there's no one right way to
Yeah.
adapt a mystery, but it'll be fun. It's an excuse to
Yeah.
get together.
Yeah, as you said, we all do things different together, but we can always learn from someone, and maybe I will learn this and not do exactly what you do, but I can, adapt to the way
Mhm.
I do my thing. So, I from one thing learn 1,000 things, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Uh, Do you have any last messages for the wonderful weirdos out there that still listen to us before we go?
Yeah, I think that if writing games or doing making stuff, if that's at all ever a thing that you're interested in, you should just try it. Um, you should
Yeah.
write something, get it out there. Even it doesn't need to be professionally done, it could just be a text document. um, there is a joy in putting things out to others and getting feedback in you know and the best part is if someone else plays what you make. That
Yeah.
feeling is super great, and I think that if it's something that you've been on the fence about, there's no harm in trying. And I would say the community is pretty great around um, helping and uplifting and helping people with support and ideas and things. That's how I've always found it. I know that there are communities that
Mm-hmm.
aren't, but
Yeah.
I've always found, there's the mothership community, the NSR community. Like, there's so many different pockets of people that just really just want to help others and see cool games. And
Yeah.
so my biggest shout out to people is that, and then always remembering that, like, when in doubt, whenever you can, get to the table.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when in doubt, follow your nose. But yeah, uh,
Exactly.
yeah, get to the table and then start small,
Hmm.
and keep at it, right? And it will
Yeah.
suck in the beginning, but it can get better. The big difference is not between making something bad and something good. It's between making something and making nothing. Because you can get better,
Hmm.
but if you don't make anything, you'll never get better. So
For
yeah,
sure.
make something, make it bad, and get it better over time.
Yeah,
Don't
and
worry
like,
about it.
and for people who are like, well, I've never done that. If you've ever made something to bring to your friends to your table, like, you've already taken that first step.
Oh yeah.
Like,
As kids, we are all making plays. We're all game designers. We just forget that we
yes,
were,
it's
right?
sort of like we've forgotten, and it's about remembering as you get older in a different
Yeah.
form.
Yeah. Awesome. Goblin, thank you so much for being here and sharing, what you know, your process, the stuff you believe. and a little bit of your experiences too. I'm very grateful, and I've learned from this. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Can you take us out saying the catchphrase of the show? Keep it weird, everybody.
Yeah, I can. Yes, I can. It's been a pleasure too, but keep it weird, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Weird Games and Weirder People. If you'd like to keep up with the show, please subscribe to be notified when we release new episodes. If you'd like to support us, please leave a review or head on to code-fi.com/WGNWP. See you next time, and remember, weird is the new wonderful.